Assassin's Creed has the best villain deaths in gaming and some of the absolute worst. Cesare thrown from castle walls screaming he cannot be killed. Haytham dying proud of the son who just stabbed him. Charles Lee sharing a final drink in complete silence. Today I'm ranking every major boss death from least impactful to most brutal and satisfying, and the gaps between them are bigger than you think. Starting with the death that barely qualified as one. The fist fight. Rodrigo Borgia is supposed to be the ultimate payoff of Assassin's Creed 2, and after 20 years of build-up and one of gaming's best villain setups, you beat him in a 2-minute bare-knuckle brawl. Here's the context. Ezio Auditore spends the entirety of AC2 hunting the Grand Master of the Templar Order across Renaissance Italy. Rodrigo orchestrates the execution of Ezio's father Giovanni and his brothers Federico and Petruccio. He's the architect of the Pazzi conspiracy in April 1478. He brokers the deal that puts Francesco de' Pazzi and Archbishop Salviati in the ground. He becomes Pope Alexander VI in 1492, giving the Templar Order control of the most powerful institution in the world. Every major event in AC2 traces back to Rodrigo Borgia. He is the reason Ezio exists as an assassin at all. And the Vatican infiltration in Sequence 14 earns its buildup. Ezio and Leonardo da Vinci construct a flying machine specifically to bypass the Vatican's walls. Ezio scales the Sistine Chapel beneath Michelangelo's freshly painted ceiling, fights through the papal guard, and finally confronts the most powerful man in Italy. Both men have pieces of Eden. Rodrigo wields the staff, Ezio wields the apple. The fight opens as a genuine Isu duel, clones and holograms colliding in the heart of the Catholic Church. But then Rodrigo stabs Ezio, and the game shifts into a fistfight. Not metaphorically, literally. Two grown men punching each other with bare hands, no weapons, no hidden blade, no pieces of Eden. One of them is 63 years old and just committed a stabbing. Players found themselves carefully pressing light attack and countering the occasional slow swing from an elderly pontiff, while the most anticipated confrontation in the series quietly collapsed around them. The community spent years defending this. Some argue the stripped-down fight makes it personal, raw, a statement about vengeance. Okay, fine. But then Rodrigo is beaten, bleeding, and begging for death, and Ezio walks away. No kill, no hidden blade. The man who destroyed the Auditore family doesn't even die in AC2. He survives until Brotherhood, when Cesare poisons him off-screen between cutscenes. A character players hunted for 20 in-game years dies in a sequel they never see. The final exchange has the payoff Ubisoft intended. Ezio refusing to become a killer for its own sake is exactly the point of his arc. But for every player who spent 40 hours building to that moment, the game blinked first. That is what the bottom of this list looks like. But if a bloodless fistfight is the franchise's biggest letdown, wait until you see the boss death where the player doesn't even get to deliver the killing blow. The Spectator. Prince Amit is the main villain of Assassin's Creed Revelations, and after spending an entire game chasing him across Constantinople, Ezio Auditore watches someone else kill him. Here's the setup. Amit is a genuine ideological threat. As the Byzantine-backed Ottoman prince, he spends Revelations hunting the 5 Masyaf keys, ancient data disks created by Altair himself that unlock the grand library beneath Masyaf Fortress. Amit doesn't want the keys for power. He's exhausted by the endless war between assassins and Templars, between Byzantines and Ottomans, between fathers and sons. His dying confession makes this explicit. He joined the Templars because he was tired. Tired of watching his family destroy itself. Tired of a world where every generation repeats the same violence. That motivation makes him one of the franchise's most sympathetic antagonists. He's not wrong about any of it. But then, Ezio finally corners him. After a carriage chase sequence across Galata, Amit and Ezio fistfight on the edge of a cliff above the Bosphorus Strait. The fight lasts roughly 4 minutes. Players trade blows, hold off Amit's guards, and push through a final grapple sequence. And at the moment of resolution, when Ezio has Amit beaten and the hidden blade should come out, the cutscene triggers. Selim I arrives on horseback. Selim, Amit's brother and the newly crowned Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, doesn't say a word to Ezio. He simply rides up, grabs Amit mid-confrontation, and throws him from the cliff into the water far below. Then he stares at Ezio for a long moment and warns him to leave Constantinople and never return. Ezio has zero input. The kill belongs entirely to a character the player has never controlled and barely interacted with. Selim isn't positioned as a heroic figure. He just wanted his rival dead, and Ezio happened to do the legwork. Here's what makes it worse. Amit's death actually carries real thematic weight. His brother killing him for the throne mirrors exactly the pointless dynastic violence Amit spent his life trying to escape. The tragedy is right there. It's earned. Ubisoft wrote a genuinely affecting villain death, and then gave it to a side character in a cutscene players watch with their hands in their laps. Amit deserved a proper hidden blade. Ezio deserved to deliver it, but at least Amit had a reason to exist as a villain, unlike the next boss on this list, who exists almost entirely to be forgotten. The Stranger. Laureano de Torres y Ayala is the Templar Grandmaster of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, and the game never bothers to make you care about him. Here's the problem. AC4 is a story about Edward Kenway, a selfish Welsh privateer who spends most of the game hunting the observatory for personal profit. Edward doesn't start as an assassin, he doesn't start as anything ideologically coherent. He's chasing money and freedom, and using whatever tools are available to get both. That's what makes the game brilliant. But it also means Torres never becomes a true nemesis. Torres appears in a handful of cutscenes across the entire game. He wants the observatory as a surveillance weapon, a way for the Templars to monitor every person of interest on the planet using blood samples collected from their targets. He's competent and controlled. He dresses well, he has an agenda, and beyond that, the game offers almost nothing. No personal confrontation with Edward until the very end. No moment where Torres does something unforgivable that makes the player need his death. No history between them built over 40 hours of gameplay. Compare that to Cesare Borgia, who burned cities and murdered his own father. Compare it to Charles Lee, who Connor watched at his mother's village fire for decades. Torres shows up, explains his plan, and waits to be assassinated. But then the observatory sequence arrives, and to the game's credit, it goes hard. Torres activates the facility's ancient Isu defense systems. Deathlight beams sweep the chamber floor. Moving platforms shift unpredictably. Edward has to navigate the entire lethal geometry of an alien machine while closing in for the kill. It's one of the most visually spectacular environments in the franchise. The observatory itself is extraordinary. The fight around Torres absolutely earns its setting. And then Torres dies with more grace than any Black Flag villain deserves to. He doesn't rage at Edward. He doesn't curse the assassins. He looks at Edward, beaten and panting, and finally committed to something bigger than profit, and says exactly this. You wear your convictions well. They suit you. That's his entire death scene. A compliment. An acknowledgement that Edward became something real. It works as character writing for Edward in a way nothing else in the final sequence does. Torres recognizing the change in him is genuinely earned, but Torres himself earned none of it. He's a reflection for Edward's arc, not a villain in his own right. Every single line he delivers exists to illuminate someone else. His death is the payoff for a journey he barely appeared in. But if Torres is forgettable because the game never gave him room, wait until you see the boss who had all the room in the world and still wasted it. The anti-climax. Francois Thomas Germain is the secret architect of the French Revolution, and after one of the franchise's most ambitious villain setups, you kill him with 3 stealth stabs while he stares at a wall. Here's what Germain actually is. Not just a Templar Grandmaster, a sage, one of the Isu reincarnates, the rare humans born with first civilization DNA who carry fragmented memories of a previous life. Germain is the living reincarnation of Eta, Juno's husband, a being who predates human civilization by thousands of years. He found the vault of Jacques de Molay beneath the temple in Paris, inherited the 14th century Grandmaster's entire vision, and spent decades engineering the collapse of the French monarchy specifically to purge the Templar order of its corrupt noble class and rebuild it from nothing. He stood at Louis XVI's execution in January 1793 and screamed across the crowd, Jacques de Molay, vous êtes vengé. Jacques de Molay, you are avenged. That is an extraordinary villain, a man carrying the rage of a martyr burned alive 500 years earlier, reshaping an entire nation's history to settle a debt that old. Etsi Unity's marketing leaned hard into this. The entire French Revolution as Templar conspiracy, orchestrated by a single immortal consciousness across centuries. But then the boss fight arrives, and Germain stands in the temple chamber waving a sword of Eden around, while Arno hides behind pillars, avoiding lightning blasts. 3 times Arno sneaks up from behind, 3 times the hidden blade goes in. That's the entire fight. 3 stealth assassinations on a sage while he's distracted. Here's what breaks it completely. Elise de la Serre dies in this exact moment, not in a separate scene, not before the fight or after it. She attacks Germain directly while Arno is pinned, the sword of Eden backfires, and the explosion kills her instantly. Arno then delivers the final blow to a dying old man bleeding on the floor. Players documented this in real time across every forum and review thread in November 2014. You watch the woman Arno loves die, then you stab the person who caused it, and it feels like nothing. Not because the writing failed, because the gameplay gave you zero room to feel any of it. There's no pause, no wait. The hidden blade goes in, and the credits begin loading. Germain deserved a fight that matched what he was, a sage, a 500-year-old consciousness, the inheritor of Jacques de Molay's legacy. legacy. Instead, he got a stealth puzzle while Elise burned beside him. But if Germain wasted his setup through bad design, wait until you meet the boss whose death was genuinely great but landed in a game nobody played. The Beloved. Adewale is the most beloved supporting character in AC4 Black Flag, and Assassin's Creed Rogue makes you assassinate him with your own hands. Here's who Adewale is before Rogue even starts. Edward Kenway's quartermaster, the former slave who became the most competent man on the Jackdaw, the protagonist of Freedom Cry, AC4's standalone DLC, where he single-handedly dismantled a slave trading network across Saint-Domingue. A fan favorite by every measurable metric. Players spent 60 combined hours with this man across 2 games before Rogue asks them to kill him. The setup is cold and deliberate. Shay Patrick Cormac, Rogue's Templar protagonist, is tasked with eliminating Adewale in New York, 1760. Haytham Kenway, Edward's own son, provides a diversionary skirmish nearby to draw Adewale's attention. Shay moves through the crowd toward his target's back. There is no dramatic confrontation, no moment where Adewale turns around and both men have a reckoning. The game gives players full control of Shay's movement, full control of his hidden blade, and then it waits. You do it yourself. Not metaphorically, literally. Rogue doesn't cut to a cinematic assassination. It stays in gameplay the entire time. Every single step toward Adewale is a player input. The hidden blade trigger is a player input. Ubisoft made the complicity unavoidable. Adewale's memory corridor confession is devastating precisely because it refuses to be simple. He doesn't absolve Shay. He doesn't rage at him either. He looks at the man who just killed him and says, "You have become a monster, Shay." And Shay, who has spent the entire game convinced his Templar defection was righteous, can only answer, "Perhaps I have." That exchange lands harder than almost any equivalent scene in the franchise because neither character is wrong. Adewale is right that something monstrous just happened. Shay is right that he did it anyway. The game doesn't resolve that tension. It just lets it sit. Here's what the community almost never got to experience. Rogue launched in November 2014 on the same day as Unity, a last generation title releasing alongside a current generation one with better marketing and a Paris setting. Players who discovered Rogue years later through remaster or sale consistently rank Adewale's death among the franchise's finest moments. Players who missed it in 2014 never knew it existed. That's the specific tragedy here, a genuinely great boss death buried under a release schedule. But if Adewale hits hard because of who he was before you killed him, wait until you see the death that hits hard because of who kills who and exactly how much it costs them both. The father. Haytham Kenway is the Grand Master of the Colonial Templar Rite, and Assassin's Creed 3 makes you play as him for the first 3 sequences before asking his son to kill him. Here's the genius of that structure. A C3 opens in London, 1754. You control a well-dressed, competent, genuinely compelling protagonist across 3 full-story sequences. You recruit allies, infiltrate a theater, sail to the colonies, build a power base. The game never tells you who he is. Then the Animus loading screen reveals Haytham Kenway, Templar, and players who expected to spend the entire game as this man suddenly understood they had been playing the villain. That attachment is load-bearing. Everything that follows depends on it. By the time Connor fights Haytham at Fort George in October 1781, players have spent 40 hours watching these 2 men orbit each other. Temporary alliances, philosophical arguments about freedom and order that neither man wins. Moments where the father and son almost found common ground and didn't. The relationship is the best written element in AC3 by a significant distance, and the game knows it. The fight itself takes place in a courtyard while French cannons reduce Fort George to rubble around them. Multi-phase melee combat, a cannonball interruption that separates both fighters, then Haytham pinning Connor to the ground with both hands around his throat. Connor ejects his hidden blade and drives it through his father's neck. Not a clean kill, not a theatrical one. Desperate and close and ugly. But then the memory corridor arrives, and Haytham Kenway delivers the finest death monologue in franchise history. He refuses sentiment completely. He tells Connor not to expect a deathbed reconciliation. Then quieter, he says this: "Still, I'm proud of you, in a way. You have shown great conviction, strength, courage, all noble qualities. I should have killed you long ago. Pride and regret in the same breath. Love expressed as tactical failure." Connor can only whisper, "Goodbye, father." The community has never stopped discussing this scene, because Haytham means every word of it. The pride is genuine. The regret is genuine. He's not performing. He's just too Templar to say what he actually means without wrapping it in a threat. But if Haytham's death is the franchise's most emotionally complex, wait until you see the one that earns its brutality over 20 years of pure rage. The First Blade. Uberto Alberti is the first man Ezio Auditore ever kills, and nothing in the franchise has ever hit harder as an opening act. Here's what Uberto Uberto does. In April 1476, he attends a party at the Auditore household as a trusted family friend. Giovanni Auditore, Ezio's father, gives Uberto coded documents exposing a Templar conspiracy inside the Florentine government. Giovanni trusts him completely. Uberto is the Gonfaloniere of Florence, a man of law, a man of standing, and he takes those documents directly to the conspirators. At the public execution in the Piazza della Signoria, Uberto stands on the platform and watches Giovanni, Federico, and Petruccio Auditore hang. He doesn't look away. He reads the sentence himself. Ezio is in the crowd, 17 years old, watching his father and two brothers die in front of a jeering crowd while Uberto folds the pardon he was supposed to deliver and puts it back in his coat. Players who have never felt genuine hatred for a video game character felt it here. The assassination happens at a Verrocchio Garden exhibition 2 sequences later. Ezio moves through the crowd, closes the distance, and then the game hands control back. You do it yourself. Ezio pulls his dead father's hidden blade and drives it into Uberto 5 times. Not once, 5 times. The hidden blade goes in and comes out and goes back in, and the game lets every single impact register. Because Ezio isn't executing Uberto, he's destroying him. Uberto's dying justification is almost perfectly calibrated to extend the rage instead of diffuse it. He tells Ezio that betrayal is simply what people do to protect what they love. To protect the things you love, you would have acted like me. It's designed to sound reasonable. It lands as obscene, and Ezio's reply is the line that defines his entire character. Not a threat, not a speech, just 4 words delivered with complete clarity. Yes, and I did. Then he turns to the crowd and screams it. The Auditore are not dead. I'm still here. Me, Ezio Auditore. Every single person watching understood in that moment that they were playing a different kind of assassin than Altair. Raw and young and furious, and not yet sure that fury should be controlled. Here's what nobody talks about enough. The weapon is Giovanni's hidden blade, not Ezio's. The instrument of Uberto's death is the same instrument of Giovanni's work. The man who handed Giovanni to his executioners dies on Giovanni's blade. The franchise never makes that explicit. It doesn't need to. But if Uberto's death is the purest expression of earned rage in AC history, wait until you see the kill that turned rage into something unforgettable with 5 words and a castle wall. The Fall. Cesare Borgia is the greatest villain in Assassin's Creed history, and his death is the most satisfying moment the franchise has ever produced. Here's what Cesare is across Brotherhood. He poisons his own father, he burns Monteriggioni to rubble in January 1500, killing Mario Auditore in the opening sequence and taking the Apple of Eden while Ezio barely escapes. He commands the Borgia armies across central Italy, controls the papal military, and dismantles every institution the assassins spent 30 years building. He is everywhere. He is untouchable, and he believes it completely. That belief is the whole character. Cesare doesn't operate from fear or ambition the way most AC villains do. He operates from absolute certainty. Certainty that he is exceptional. Certainty that history belongs to him. Certainty that nobody alive has the right to stop him. Ezio spends the entirety of Brotherhood systematically dismantling that certainty. Burning Borgia towers across Rome one by one, liberating districts, rebuilding the Assassin Brotherhood from 15 recruits trained on Tiber Island to a network capable of taking the Vatican itself. By the time Cesare is captured and imprisoned in the Castel Sant'Angelo, Ezio has destroyed everything Cesare built piece by piece over the course of a single game, but then Cesare escapes, and Ezio follows him to the siege of Viana in Spain, 1507. 7 years after Monteriggioni, 7 years after Mario's death, 7 years of patient, methodical work arriving at this exact moment on castle battlements above a Spanish valley. The boss fight earns every second of that buildup. Cesare fights in full armor, and the hidden blade can't penetrate it. Players have to systematically strip that armor piece by piece across multiple phases, breaking his defenses down exactly the way Ezio dismantled his empire, one district at a time, until Cesare is finally exposed. The parallel is exact, and it's intentional. Then the final exchange. Cesare, beaten and gasping, still certain. You cannot kill me. No man can murder me. Ezio's reply is 5 words. Then I leave you to fate. And he throws Cesare from the castle walls. Not a hidden blade, not a weapon. Gravity. Ezio doesn't murder him. He just stops holding on. Cesare's own impossible arrogance becomes the instrument of his death. The boast he made in his final breath repurposed immediately as his epitaph. The franchise never topped this. Not the silence of Charles Lee's tavern. Not the tragedy of Hatham's pride. Not the rage of Uberto's 5 stabs. Nothing in 17 years of Assassin's Creed has ever been this perfectly constructed. Every single element earned. Every single beat paid off. Cesare Borgia didn't just die well. He died exactly as he lived, certain it couldn't happen, and wrong about everything. That is what the top of this list looks like. And every death we covered today, from Rodrigo's fistfight to that castle wall in Viana, tells you something true about why this franchise never lets go of the people who love it. The Hidden Blade lands hardest when everything before it was real. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.